Hello and welcome to Section 1, Lesson 5, Mimicking Native Speakers. So in this lesson, we are going to cover why mimicking is useful. We're going to cover it also from a beginner perspective. We're going to look at a few different ways of mimicking. And finally, I'm going to go through in some detail, and I'm also going to demonstrate to you how I use mimicking. So let's start with why mimicking is useful, and we have touched upon this before, but let's focus on the most important bits. So mimicking is nice because it forces you or encourages you to listen very attentively. When you mimic, you have to listen to what the native speaker says, you have to listen to your audio, and you can do that at the same time, and you can compare them. And even if it's hard to just listen to yourself and spot errors, it can be difficult, you can often hear that something is not the same. I will show you how to do that later. It also exposes you to the correct model over and over and over, which is not the same as, say, you're reading your textbook or sitting talking to yourself or something like that. That doesn't expose you to the right way of saying it over and over, but mimicking does that, so that's very nice. It works for individual sounds, so for example, if you're practicing your aspiration or maybe tone pairs or something like that, it works very well for that. But it also works excellently for longer passages. So let's say that you're mimicking, a phrase or a longer sentence or something like that, then mimicking is great for getting the right pace, for getting intonation right and so on, all that good stuff we're talking about in Section 5. Mimicking is also kind of the only way you can practice pronunciation well on your own without anybody else and for free. So it's a very nice way to practice in that sense. Naturally, you want feedback at some point, but listening to someone saying something and trying to mimic them is something you can do just as long as you have a computer, right? I also suggest that you combine your mimicking with theory, and the theory is basically everything we do in these videos, because when we go through, say, tones in Section 2, you will know what to pay attention to, you will also know what to practice, and it will decrease the likelihood that you are making mistakes. So pair it with some kind of understanding of what you are focusing on and what you're trying to learn. So just a reminder for beginners here, and I've been saying this many times, I know, but listening is important. Don't jump too quickly to trying to say things without feedback, because it means that you might be saying the wrong things. And I hate to say this, but it is pretty difficult sometimes to change pronunciation if you've been using something incorrectly for a long time. Now, I'm not saying you should not speak, I'm just saying you need feedback to make sure that you spot the errors early. Like I said in the introduction, like in the first lesson, I made a mistake with a third tone for 2 years, and it took me hundreds of hours to fix, and I'm not joking here. It took me more than 100 hours of practice to fix. And I just as a word of advice, you don't want to do that. So make sure you get feedback. But mimicking is still better than most other ways of practicing on your own, so it's still something you can do. And like I said, I'm not saying you need to get feedback after every sentence. I'm just saying don't wait for like several months or something like that. And the problem is, of course, it could be that you don't hear the mistake. You might be thinking you're saying the right thing, but you're not. Now, mimicking is still the best way for you to hear that, and you might be able to, and as I said, I will show you in a minute. So let's look at a few different types of mimicking. So if you look around a bit online, there are many people who advocate different kinds of mimicking. And I'm advocating the last one here, but I'm going to go through the others since those are also useful. I'm not saying they are not useful, I'm just saying that in this course I'm mostly focusing on the third one. So mental shadowing is something that I do when I listen. So for example, if I'm out walking or something. So mental listening is a kind of echo of what's being said. I don't even say anything aloud, that's why I call it mental shadowing. So I'm just trying to repeat what the person is saying as they say it. And since you don't have to say it aloud, it's kind of only a very, concentrated way of focusing on what they're saying. So it's not even speaking aloud. And this is something that it's a little bit hard to describe, but trying to echo what they're saying in your head, as it were. it kind of helps me focus on the pronunciation part of what they're saying. Not necessarily the words, but this is a great way to, maybe if you are working on your aspiration, you can focus on how a certain person does aspiration when you listen to a podcast or to something, right? Then we have delayed shadowing. So this is essentially the same thing, but aloud. So you're listening to someone speaking and then repeating what they are saying immediately after they are saying it. And the advantage with this is, of course, you can do it with audio you haven't prepared. As we shall see with chorus mimicking, the third kind here, you have to know the audio in advance, otherwise it doesn't work. Now, delayed shadowing can work very well if you have studied Chinese for a while and kind of can follow what's going on. For a complete beginner, it's probably too hard. But I find this method can also be quite useful once you get maybe to the intermediate stage or even to the advanced stage. Then this kind of mimicking is pretty nice. The third one then is the one I'm going to show you in a bit, and that is chorus mimicking. So that means that you speak alongside the native speaker. And if I would do this in class or like with when I'm coaching people, you can do it, if you do it live especially, you can then say it with them and they say it with you and you say it at the same pace, basically saying the same thing in a chorus. And this reinforces all kinds of things, and it's very good for reinforcing correct pronunciation. And you can achieve this on your own with the computer. So let's look at how to do that, and I'll just go through the steps here briefly before I show you. So first you select target audio, and there's plenty of audio to mimic in the course, but I encourage you to do this with any audio you have. So you listen first, that's always the key thing, and you can, if you want to do this before you start the mimicking session, you put it on your smartphone, you make sure you're familiar with the content and so on, before you even think about mimicking it, right? And then I also suggest that you study it. And when I say study here, I mean learn grammar you don't know. If there's a word you don't know what it means, look it up and so on. So you shouldn't be mimicking things you have no idea what it means, because then the connection between, meaning and pronunciation is gone, and that's not very good. And then you focus on accuracy. You try to say the things exactly as the native speaker says them. And when I say exactly, I mean exactly. It should be a chorus where you're saying the same thing. You should sound as one. Of course, pacing, especially for longer passages, can be hard, but that doesn't matter. You can do one word at a time and then gradually build up to the whole phrase. That's fine. And the goal here is to produce a recording of your own where you say exactly the same thing as the native speaker and you sound, well, ideally exactly the same, but of course our voices are always different, so it's not you can never do it exactly. But you should come as close as you can. So you should also record your version and then send it for feedback, because when you submit it for feedback, you can then compare with, like the person giving the feedback can compare with the original, can listen to your performance here and spot what things do you still need to work on, and then you go back and listen for those things and you repeat the process again. Okay, so that being said, let's head over to Audacity and I will show you how to mimic. Welcome to Audacity. This is the program I use the most when I mimic, and it's the one I suggest that you use as well. It is a cross-platform program, which means you can use it in most operating systems, and it's available for free. So it's a good choice for most people. There are, of course, other programs that do the same thing, so feel free to use something else, but I'm going to show how this works in Audacity. So first I'm going to load up the audio, and that's simply just dropping the audio in here. And I'm going to first show with Word. So zoom out a bit. That's Control Scroll Wheel. I'm not going to go through the details of the interface here. I just want to show you the process, the procedures. So zooming out a bit, and let's listen to it.
东西，东西，
Okay, so this is 东西, which means thing in Chinese.
东西，
So it's a first tone and then a neutral tone. So let's say we want to practice this neutral tone here. We want to practice this word. So of course you can first listen. And you can listen many times by holding down Shift, and then you can see this turns into a loop thing, so you can listen as many times as you want.
东西，东西，东西，东西，东西。
And this can be helpful, especially for longer clips if you want to listen to a specific part many times, or you cannot pay attention to everything at once. So then you loop and listen for different parts and different bits of the audio and so on. And of course, I'm not going to go through the full repetition here, depending on how much you've learned before and how quickly you learn these things. It might take you a lot of times to get the listening right. You must have listened many times. And I'm going to shorten it down here, of course. So let's go to mimicking. What do you do when you feel ready to say this? So instead of using the loop function, I'm just going to play.
东西
And then I'm going to start saying it with the native speaker here. So I'll hold down shift and loop, and then I will say it with him.
东西
东西东西东西东西东西 Okay, so now I feel comfortable with that, and that might take you much longer, but we're going to go ahead here. Then instead of hitting play, we'll hit record. But now I've said a lot of things in between, so I'm going to hit play manually here a few times.
东西
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 Okay, I think got the timing right.
东西
Okay, so looking at this, it looks reasonable, I would say. So let's listen to it.
东西东西
Okay, sounds okay. So here you can manipulate the volume. So we can boost my audio here, for example. If they are not the same volume, it can be hard to hear.
东西东西
The more equal they are, the better. So in a perfect world, they would align 100%, and that's very difficult to do. But try the best you can. You can also mute, so you can mute my track here and just listen to him.
东西东西
Mute him and listen to me. 东西东西 and
东西
okay, do you notice any differences?
东西
Okay, so I think I notice one difference. I tend to make my C here a little bit longer. 东西 So maybe that's something I should think about. If I want to sound like him, at least, I should make my C even lighter. So there are two ways of doing this. We did the looping here. So let me show you another way of doing the same thing. You then select all the audio, and then you go to effects, and you can do something called repeat here. And you just type in how many times you want it. So let's stay with the default here, and we click OK. So it will simply repeat the audio however many times we want. And this can make it easier with pacing if you find that's difficult. And it is kind of tricky sometimes. So this one you can play many times. And then you can, you can join in when you feel like it, and you can choose one of them when you listen. So let's do that. I'm going to hit record immediately here.
东西东西
东西东西东西东西东西东西 And feel free to add breaks or make it, it doesn't have to be this intensive if you don't want to. So let's pick one. I think it sounded better towards the end. So let's maybe this one. So we can listen to this.
东西东西东西
Okay, so this sounds reasonably good to me. So what would it sound like if you did something wrong here? Like the difference I said about the C here, the length here is extremely small. What if we did something more that maybe a mistake maybe a beginner would do? So if you say 东西 with the full first tone, what would that sound like? So let's go again. Maybe just let's do all of them.
东西
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to select everything and then do it. So let's start again and try this.
东西
东西东西东西东西东西东西 Okay, so now I try to do it with a full tone. So listen to this and see what you think.
东西东西东西东西
Okay, so you should hear that there is a discord here. It doesn't sound very nice. You can hear that it's different at least. And maybe you will not be able to hear exactly what is wrong, but you should be able to hear something here. So if you listen, let's listen to just this bit.
东西
Okay, and then we unmute me. 东西东西 Okay. So yeah, that sounds a bit off, I think. So then you can find the bits that feel off and kind of investigate them. Either you just hear what's right or what you're doing wrong, rather, or you can ask someone for feedback. Okay, so enough about this clip here. Let's try another clip. And now I'm going to take a sentence instead and zoom out a bit. This one starts very close to the beginning here, so I'm going to use this time shift tool here to just drag it in a little bit so we have a little bit more time before we start. So let's listen.
请问我可以进来吗？
Okay, 请问我可以进来吗? So excuse me, or can I come in? Can I enter? So if you take this sentence from somewhere else where the audio is not so clean, maybe you have background noise and so on, I should say that Audacity has pretty good features for that. You can do effect, and you can go to noise reduction, and you can remove a lot of background noise, actually, like buzzing or background noise of various kinds. It works pretty well. You can also change the tempo. So if you listen to this again,
请问我可以进来吗？
this is by no means super fast, but it's not very slow either. And if you think it is too fast and you want to slow it down, you can use change tempo. And don't use change speed, use change tempo, because this one will change the pitch as well. You will sound like a Smurf if you speed it up, and you will sound very low pitched and maybe a bit drunk if you lower it. So use change tempo, it just changes the speed. Yes. Okay, we need to select, of course. So let's do that again, tempo. And here you can enter a percentage. And if you go beyond, say, minus 25, 30%, the audio starts breaking up. So maybe don't do that, but maybe 25 is okay. So let's try this. And you can see it became longer by 25%. So let's listen to this version.
请问我可以进来吗？
And you can hear the audio starts breaking up a little bit, but it's still fairly easy to hear the sounds, right?
请问我可以进来吗？
Okay, so you can do that. Now, there is also the option of using slow audio. These sentences are recorded in both versions, i.e. they are not slowed down, but the person was asked to speak more slowly. That is different, though. So note that that means that some tone things might behave a little bit differently. So normally I prefer to use full normal speed, and if you have to, slow it down, rather than using audio that is spoken slowly for a learner, for example, because that tends to be less natural. I'm not going to use this slowdown version now, though. I'm going to undo this. And let's mimic this bit then. And I'm going to select everything. Let's do the repeat and see how that goes. Okay.
请问我
So let's do the recording immediately. I will wait a few times before I say something.
请问我可以进来吗？请
请问
问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问
Okay, so that's maybe enough. So let's listen to this bit.
请问我可以进来吗？
Sounds pretty overlapping. His voice is louder than mine, so maybe I boost this a little bit.
请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？
Okay, so that sounds okay, but let's see what happens if we make a mistake here. I'm going to say 我 instead of 我. So I'm going to use a fourth tone for the word me here. So instead of saying 我可以, I'm going to say 我可以 and see how that, if we can spot this. So again, select everything and we just go. And I'm going to deliberately get this wrong.
请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？
So it's sometimes a bit hard to say these things deliberately incorrectly, but let's see how I did. So we listen to this bit maybe.
请问我可以进来吗？请问我可以进来吗？
Okay, so do you hear that the chorus, the kind of harmony, as it were, is broken by that tone there in the middle? It's this bit. Let's listen to it again.
请问我可以进来吗？
So the rest sounds okay. I'm pretty much in line with him, but not that bit.
请问我可以进来吗？
Okay, so then you can, of course, play just that bit and listen to it. We can mute him even. 我可以进来吗? Okay, so that is not very good. So this way you can play around with it and try to find out how close you are. And usually I hear when I'm off when I'm recording. I mean, I don't sometimes even have to record. Just when repeating along with the native speaker, you can hear when you get it right and when you get it wrong, because it sounds very nice when you're saying it exactly the same way. Of course, the last thing you do then is to record, because then you can ask someone else for comparison. You can send it in to me, for example, and we can analyze it for you and see what the differences indeed are. And that is, of course, very valuable. But so having this recording is good both for you, right now, and you can also use it later for reference. Okay, so that's all for this little Audacity demonstration. Good luck with your mimicking. Okay, so let's recap what we did in this lesson. So first we said mimicking is good because it focuses on correct pronunciation and it allows you to compare with correct pronunciation. We also reiterated again that you should get feedback. You need to know if you're doing these things right. Maybe not immediately, but you do need feedback. You need to verify what you're doing. Some theory is always helpful. It helps you direct your attention. And then we also looked at 3 different kinds of mimicking. It was mental shadowing, delayed shadowing, and then chorus mimicking we did here in Audacity. So that's all for this lesson. 谢谢收看. Thanks for watching and see you in the next lesson. So that was lesson 5 in section 1 of my pronunciation course. This is, in fact, the last lesson in section 1 of the course, which deals with how to learn Mandarin pronunciation, how to practice, and how to improve. Section 2 of the course covers Mandarin tones, so it contains everything you need to know as a beginner, but also what you need to know as a more advanced student if you want to keep on learning. Then in section 3, I go through all the initials, and again, there is enough here for beginners to get started, but there's also plenty of information that will be useful for more advanced students. The same goes for section 4, which is about Mandarin finals, and then finally in section 5, I talk about prosody, and that would be then connected speech and how to sound more natural in Mandarin. If you're interested in more content like this, please go to pronunciation.hackingchinese.com.